Okay. Okay, great. Thank you guys again for being here. I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't done a live webinar since February or March, and I really have been wanting to. I've done some stuff around what's happening in the world since March, talked about it in various ways, but I don't know. It feels like time. It's so interesting. I'm sure everyone's having their own experience of this as well, that how things have changed and also kind of not changed and all of that, and how our minds can kind of get used to a new normal and then get really upset by the new normal, and just all of the ups and downs, so completely normal and common. So I just want to speak to some of that today. So before I get started, let me just let you know, in case you don't know, that you can't be seen right now. So, but it looks like everyone can hear me, which is great. And I definitely want to speak to some of your questions. So if you have questions, don't put them in the chat. You can say hello as you are in the chat, which is great. But use the Q&A button at the bottom. I'm not sure how it is on a phone. I think it's still kind of in your menu. On a computer, it's definitely there at the bottom. There's a Q&A function. No one will see your questions, but I will. So I'll be able to address them there. So, and I think they might be anonymous. I'm not sure, but just feel free to post whatever you're comfortable posting there. And I want to definitely, find some time, make sure we have some time at the end to speak to a lot of those. So what I want to sort of start us off with, kick us off with, is a discussion of two things. One is how resilient we are by nature, like by design. I'm going to talk in a really high level way about all human beings, how resilience and the ability to not only navigate anything that comes our way, navigate change, uncertainty, all of that, not just navigate it, but how it is so much our nature to kind of flow right through it, so I want to talk about resilience. And if you've heard this, if you're familiar with this understanding I share, if you think that you've heard some of this before, please try to listen for something brand new, because I think this happens a lot. We have heard a lot that's been really helpful, and a lot of things stick with us, which is great. But then our mind can kind of say, "Oh yeah, I know this already," or I don't know. It thinks it fills in the blanks way too much. It thinks it knows what's going to be said, and so it misses a lot. So whether you've heard this before or you haven't, just kind of listen as if you don't know anything about what we're talking about, and see if something lands with you in a brand new way. So I want to talk about resilience in a very big universal kind of way, and I also want to talk about how what we're going through right now is such an opportunity. And I know it feels like it's a lot of bad a lot of times, but it's such an opportunity here for us to realize our resilience, for us to see, to feel like, wow, I'm unshakable. If I've made it through all that I've made it through, if I've survived the last several months, if I'm just living each moment by moment by moment, doing as well as I am at times, I can make it through anything. And I've seen personally, for a lot of people in my community, for myself, it feels like when things get really hard and crazy and unexpected, like they have in the past several months, it is an opportunity for us to deepen in what we know to be true. Now, it's also a time for sure where minds will get very caught up in all that's happening. So a mind will want to follow and track and figure out, and like what and predict and all of that stuff. And we can't do that right now. A mind cannot do that. It can try and it will just exhaust itself. But in many ways, and that's a whole sort of other conversation, a mind cannot really even make sense of what's coming at us and what we're hearing and what's going to happen and all of that, because what's coming at us is it totally contradicts itself half the time. Like we're in this state where it's almost like no one really knows what is true or what to believe, which makes it really, really hard for a human brain. and a mind. Like it's a mind's worst nightmare. But that doesn't mean that we have to suffer and feel lost in all of this. What it means is we want to look in a different direction. We don't want to, our mind is going to try to figure all this out, but this is an opportunity for us to see how we can be at peace and where we can look despite what our mind is trying to and failing at figuring out. Okay, so I'm going to speak to those two things, and then I'll hopefully save at least 20 minutes for the end to address any questions you have. And even though I'm speaking at sort of a high level, please give me whatever's on your mind, because it's not like we're going to have this big, universal level spiritual type of conversation. And then if you're sitting there concerned about, oh my gosh, what if I lose my job? Or how am I going to homeschool my kids? Or I haven't seen my elderly parents in months or something like that. Like that isn't important. That's incredibly important. It's incredibly important. And the big picture of things that we're speaking to speak to those more concrete, specific things. They really truly do. So I want us to kind of get a feel for that as well. That looking in a different direction helps with the specifics. It's incredibly practical. So anything you have, put it in there, no matter whether it feels like it fits in our conversation or not. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what it means to be resilient. I used to think that resilience was like a personality trait. Some people have it, some people don't, or we can work at it. Some people have more of it for sure than other people, right? It looked like a personality trait. It looked like sometimes we feel resilient, sometimes we just don't. But it also looked like resilience was very much kind of at risk, because when things happened in life, when someone died, I mean, talking like, the big things we all deal with, when someone dies, when we lose a job, when we get sick, when someone we love gets sick, when all of our plans blow up in front of us and our whole life changes, that those things that happen to the whole of us. That's how it looked like. Oh, if someone I love dies, that's going to happen to me, and my entire life from that moment forward is going to be about coping with this thing that happened to the whole of me. And I want to suggest something slightly different there, really different, but we'll make it slight. We'll kind of ease into it. So for sure, things happen, as we all know, in life, and psychological experience moves through us, right? So we are shocked and we grieve and we're scared and we have all of those emotions and all the good stuff, and we feel excited and joyful and all of that, right? So life happens. We're having this always evolving, always moving, very wild at times psychological experience of life happening. And when things happen, like someone dies or someone gets sick or something like that, we experience that through our psychology. So we have this psychological experience. And by that, I mean, we have thoughts and we have feelings, basically, and then we act on those and we do behaviors. But let's say we have thoughts and feelings about what's happening out there. And our thoughts and feelings and our psychology and the circumstances, they aren't the whole of us. They're only a teeny tiny part of us. But when it looks like they're the whole of us, of course, we're scared to death of anything that might happen. And of course, we're super kind of close up to it. We're like, oh, this thing happened and I have to change it. And we're very, very involved in kind of more of the physical world and our experience, our psychological experience and all of that, when it looks like that's all there is. Of course we are, right? When it looks like that's the bulk of life and who we are, of course we're going to be really close up to it in that sense. But consider that our resilience is such that when those things happen, when our psychology moves through us, when life happens out there, we feel it, but what we're feeling is an experience. It's not touching who we are. It's not affecting who we are. It truly isn't. Who we are is something so much bigger that allows for all experience to move through us and come to life and move right out. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't going to be affected by it in the moment. Of course we are, right? We're going to grieve and we're going to feel all the stuff we feel, and as much as we don't like it at times, I think that's kind of what we signed up for. That's what we're here for, right? Is to be alive, to be human beings, to be fully in this interactive, crazy, busy, full contact sport of life. And so we're going to feel all that. But imagine feeling all that and having it all happen, but knowing that who you are, like the whole of you, that's just experience. The whole of you is not touched by all this stuff that's moving through us, that we do not get traumatized and have to go fix it. We feel trauma for sure. We feel trauma, but that there's a bigger us, the bigger part of us that is untouched by anything, that can't be touched by anything, because it is health, it is love, it is connection, it is clarity, it is all of those things. And then our experience moves through us and then moves right out. So there are a couple things now what I just said, you, that may not be new to you, it may be totally new and foreign to you, I don't know, but I really want you to see how seeing it in this way, like really beginning to wonder, wow, what if I'm in here, I'm back here, and yes, my mind is all over the place and life is flowing through me and all kinds of stuff's happening, but I'm actually okay. That's not the whole of me that's getting touched. It's just my experience. Just, and I don't mean just as if to dismiss it, because I know it is, we feel it. That's our design too, is that we feel our thoughts and our feelings in such a huge way. And it feels like it's all there is. But what if there's more? What if we are actually okay beyond all of that? Like the sky, the weather moves through, right? But the sky is not impacted by the weather. Right now, today and tomorrow, we're having hurricanes in the United States. We're having some really violent weather, and people are resilient. They're doing what they can. They know how hurricanes work. They're taking all the cover they can take. They're covering all their bases. They're going to hunker down. They're going to weather the storm, and they're going to get up when it's over and clean up the pieces, because the bigger whole of us knows how weather works and that we aren't it and it isn't us. And so in what's happening in the world right now, I think there's such a tendency to, we've been so identified with our mind for a very long time. We all have, and that's not a put down, it's just a truth. It's just how we live, how we've been conditioned, right? We're so conditioned to look at what we think and what we feel and what's happening out there, to the exclusion of this invisible part of us. It's invisible, so of course we don't see it right away. We don't know to look there right away, but we've kind of completely ignored it in a lot of ways, and we're so in the busyness of the world and the uncertainty in our mind and divisiveness, and this is happening and that's happening, and no wonder we feel like we're lost at sea. From that place, we're completely lost at sea. But that's just where our mind is going. It's just the thoughts and feelings that are moving through us. Beyond that, we're not lost at sea at all. We are full of health and we're totally okay. And this can sound like it's, again, like cliche or not practical, but I really want you to see that, seeing that this is the truth of who we are, this bigger truth of who we are, and that our experience is not who we are, and that it's always moving and changing, no matter how real, and it is real out there for sure, and it's real in our heads, no matter how big and vivid and painful at times our experience becomes, it always moves. That's showing us right there. It's not who we are. It always moves. It always changes. So think about times when you've, something horrible happened. Like think about when you were a teenager and someone bullied you or excluded you, or you had your first breakup or something like that. you were a mess, right? You felt horrible. You felt like life is not worth living. Like, where am I going to go from here? And little by little, each day after that event happened, you woke up and it was a little further from your mind. The whole time, the whole while, you were okay. You were not even bouncing back, you were bounced back. Like you were never touched to begin with. You were okay. But our mind gets so caught up in this stuff, right? So our mind is reeling and our mind is replaying it and figuring it out on our behalf or trying to and bringing it back in and all of that. And so it really feels like, no, this thing lingered and it haunted me forever and it followed me around. It can feel like that. But I want you to see the flip side of this. If we know that there's a healthy us in there beyond all of this crazy thinking, we start to see that more. We start to look there more. We start to feel it more. It just, we become more familiar with it. It feels like home. And then when our mind is all over the place, we see that for what it is too. We see, oh yeah, my mind's really reeling on what am I going to do with the kids or what's going to happen here or what if I get sick or whatever. But we start to see that as our mind doing that. And you know you're okay. You're fine in there. Your mind is just over here having a conversation. When we see it that way, it cannot help but start to flip. I promise you it does all the time. I see it for people every single day when we start to look more toward who we really are and that health and clarity, and we see how our mind works, you just see it as, oh, I'm caught up, or my mind is spinning in circles, or I'm trying to figure all of this out. And that's everything. It's night and day different from I'm not okay and life needs to change and this needs to be over with and I have to have, we need to go back to how it used to be. Completely different. So one of the biggest things, misunderstandings that has us feeling not resilient is we just don't know that we are so resilient, because when our experience moves through us, we're so caught up in it and we're looking out at the world and tracking things and we're staring there all the time. And it's not our fault. You're not staring there on purpose. It's not like you're a negative person or that anything like that. It's just that we've all been conditioned to look at what's right in our faces and in our heads. And until we see that there's another place to look, we just don't. But that means that the flip side of that is also true, that the more we see, oh, there's a peaceful me in here that's always been here. And when I'm feeling upset and uncertainty and all of that kind of stuff, like change is hard, that's my mind doing it. Then you start to see that in a completely different way. And it really starts to change things. Another piece of this misunderstanding that keeps us from seeing our own resilience is thinking that we need to do something in order to feel better. Either we need to do something or the world needs to change. Again, when the world goes back to normal, then I'll be okay. That kind of thinking. And all that does, think about it. If your mind is constantly saying, I'll be okay when the pandemic's over, I'll be okay when the pandemic's over, you have no chance. Like your mind is telling you that over and over again. You have plenty of moments of feeling okay right now. I guarantee it. You always have. You have moments. Maybe they're just little fleeting moments, but they're there all the time. But if your mind is believing and trying to tell you all the time, you'll be okay when the pandemic's over, you're not going to notice them. You're not going to notice how resilient you are. You're not going to notice how much you've bounced back and how you've just rolled with all the crazy changes we've been through in the last 5 months. You're just going to be blind to it because that's the way a mind works. A mind just tries to confirm its theory. So if our mind is in charge, thinking that when the world gets better, then we'll be okay, we kind of can't help but have that experience. But when we start to see, no, that is not true at all. Not true at all. What's really true is that we're okay all the time. We always have been okay. Then we start to see more of that. So this kind of opens up into this opportunity. So I think this is so amazing that I've seen so many people get shaken by what's understandably, right? Get so shaken by what's going on in the world, and their mind is thrown for a loop, and everything seems up in the air, and it feels very tight and it feels very scary. And what that's showing us is that we're clinging to something, or trying to cling to something that's not cling-onable. we can't we can't actually cling to it, right? We're trying to find our security in our routine, or our schedule, or what we had planned for the fall. We're trying to feel secure in all of those old things, or in relationships that now we're isolated from those people, or in freedoms that now we don't have. It's so human, so normal and human, that we're going to feel all of that is a big loss, and fearful, and like, whoa, where I don't have my bearings right now, and I feel lost in all of this. So totally normal and human that we'll feel that. But I want you to see that the feeling of constriction and tightness and fear is showing us, it's such a clear sign showing us, oh, you're thinking you need something that you don't really need. You're pinning all your happiness and security and peace of mind on something that can't provide it. And again, please don't take this personally. Please don't feel badly about this. This is every single one of us. This is just how we work as human beings. We do that. Our minds tell us, like, it's just how a mind works. Our mind tells us, when you know what's coming, and when you have a plan, and when you know you're okay and everyone you love is okay, then you'll relax. And and then when we have a moment where our mind's saying, but I don't know those things right now, our mind's just confirming our theories all over the place. And so thankfully, we have this amazing design that shows us when we're believing something that's not true. Shows us when we're believing something painful that isn't the bigger truth of who we are. The bigger truth of who we are is that we're okay all the time. Our mind may be telling us we're not, but we are. And so we get this feedback. We feel this friction when our mind isn't aligned with who we really are. When your mind is saying, oh no, things have to change, but who you really are says, no, I'm okay right now. You feel friction. You feel all the stuff that we've been feeling. And we scramble to secure things out in the world that we're seeing now we cannot secure. They're not securable by us. It just isn't going to work that way. So I know this is very, very kind of big, but I really hope you can start to get a little bit of a feel for how this is such an opportunity to have things kind of taken away, right? To have freedoms taken away, to have people we love taken away, our communication with them, to have our routines taken away, that to a mind, it's going to look really bad. And we're going to feel it. It's really scary and really bad. But what that feeling is showing us, oh, my head is very involved right now. I'm kind of living in my head in this moment, and I'm trying to secure my happiness or my peace or my security by stuff out there, and that's never going to work. And it was never going to work. It's not sustainable. It doesn't work that way. But what we get to see is we get to feel this tightness and this fear and this constriction, and then see, oh, I'm caught up in thinking right now, thinking I need something out there that I don't truly need. And it's like a pointer back home. It's like a compass that shows you, oh no, you're headed in the wrong direction right now. You're okay now. You're okay right now. And yes, things are crazy out there, but that's okay. You're okay right now. And as you see that and you look more toward what doesn't change and what doesn't move and what is always okay, you feel it. Now, this doesn't leave you ill-equipped to be in society. So I get that it sounds like that sometimes to people. They think, well, if I'm not paying attention to the politics or the numbers or what's happening here or there, how am I going to live? How am I going to make it through? it looks that way when we're used to thinking that our minds have been, and our attention and our brains have been what's getting us through life thus far. And they really aren't. They're more the servant than the master, right? So we do okay. We do just fine by something bigger that lives us. Our common sense, our responsiveness in a moment, our intuition, whatever we want to call it, we do amazingly well when we let ourselves be lived by something like that, right? And we are lived by that all the time. That never turns off. But again, like we talked about in the resilience conversation, we can really benefit by looking there a little bit more, by knowing that's the case and looking in that direction just a little bit more and seeing, wow, look how incredibly okay people are. I know that's hard to see if you've been looking at how not okay people are, but look at your own life, look at people around you, look at how resourceful and resilient and what it so much health that's just there in every single one of us by nature that we have just seen like crazy in the past 5 months. I've seen it like crazy because I know to look for it. And I know you have as well. I know you have. You have had moments of peace and happiness and hopefulness and all of that in the middle of circumstances that, according to your mind, you shouldn't feel happy at all. Like, we don't know what's happening here. We got to figure this out. That's how a mind talks. But it's not really that way. So when we get this bigger feel for what our feelings are showing us, that the tightness and the fear is just showing us, oh, I'm letting my head lead, I'm letting my head be the master, and my head is more like the servant. Then we tend to kind of come back into who we really are and just live in the moment. And in the moment is when we have the most resourcefulness. It's not irresponsible, it's just the opposite. In the moment, from beyond all the worry, is where a good idea comes up that says, oh, I know how I'll manage homeschooling and working in a week from now. I see something about that. I have an idea, right? From beyond all this crazy thinking is where we get everything good. It's where we just think, oh, I'm just going to reach out. We don't sit there and say, it's not fair. I can't go see, my grandmother in the hospital. It's horrible. Why is this pandemic happening? From beyond all of that is when we say, well, maybe I'll just call. Maybe I'll send a text. Maybe I'll do this. Like, there's so much there that is who we are, that is always wanting to come up and live us. Always. And it is always coming up and living us. The only thing that happens is sometimes we don't hear it so much because we're so up in the weeds of things. So again, our feelings are this is just giving us such an opportunity to be grounded in what never changes and what's always true. And that is our nature. That is our peace, that we are security, we are love, we have everything we need always. And it's making us really good at noticing when our mind is trying to nail down a bunch of stuff out in the world that's not nail downable. It was never going to be our ticket to security or peace or success. So there's so many things, thinking like, I just want things back to normal. I just want my routines back. I just want whatever. And I just think it's amazing to consider, yeah, you may have loved those things. You may have loved the trips you used to take and the routines you used to have and sending your kids to school for 8 hours every day and not seeing them. You may have loved all of that stuff, but it was never bringing you happiness. It wasn't. It can't. It was never bringing you security. It can't do that. It can't do that. A trip or a routine or a daily schedule or even our health, even our physical health, it doesn't bring happiness and security. Happiness and security and contentment and all of that are who we are beyond all that. And think of it this way. We've been sick and had moments of deep connection and love and peace and happiness, even while we're sick. We've had the kids gone at school and had a beautiful empty house to do everything you need to do and felt horrible. And we've had the kids home screaming in your ear and felt amazing. So all of those things we're wanting to secure and bring back and hold down and say, I'll be happy when political situations, societal situations. I mean, it's kind of a mess out there, but we have had moments of everything we've ever wanted within all of that. So it's an incredible opportunity to see where that comes from within us. It's never ever never has come from some outside circumstance, and it never can or will come from some outside circumstance. It's interesting. I was talking with someone the other day for my podcast, and she was talking about how when she was married, she's recently divorced, and when she was married, her husband would go away on these trips and leave for like 2 days, you know, to go somewhere with his guy friends, and she loved it. She's like, oh, 2 days, and I could just do whatever I want, and I don't have to cook and all of this stuff, right? And then when her husband left, which he did abruptly, and of course it was a very hard thing for her to go through, suddenly she hated being alone. And it occurred to her, you know, isn't that interesting? When my mind was saying, I'm secure because I'm married and he's coming back and I'm okay, she loved being alone. Now when same alone, it's the same in a moment, it's the same alone, but her mind has a whole different story about it, and that's what hurts. And it really reminded me of what so much of what we're going through right now, I think what a lot of people are going through, where it's not that it's innately scary or horrible, you know, to spend more time at home or to even not see people the way we used to see them. You know, I mean, we don't like it. I don't like it either. I understand that, but it's not that the isolation or the lack of freedom or the staying home or the change in work conditions or any of that in and of itself is is making us feel the whole of what we're feeling. Our thinking about this shouldn't be happening. When is this going to end? I want to go back to how it used to be. That's what's hurting us. And just sit with that for yourself in your life and see, you know, whatever feels like it's the hardest stuff to deal with in all of this, the uncertainty. I mean, that's a perfect example because we've always been uncertain. We've never ever ever known what's going to happen in the future. The only difference is now we have a conversation about it. Before we thought we knew. We thought we knew what was going to happen. Now our mind is saying, whoa, whoa, I don't know. And we really don't know. But it's not the not knowing. It's not. It's the conversation about it and what it all means. And again, it's a perfect opportunity to see, wow, when this conversation starts, I feel horrible. I'm weighed down and I'm tight and I feel terrible. And that is all showing you, oh, that's because the real me is fine. The whole of me is okay. But my mind keeps looking here and looking here and looking here. And I think this is where I need to look. You know, I'm looking there with it saying, yeah, this is a problem. And I'm not backing up and seeing the bigger picture of things. So let me go to a few questions that are in the Q&A because I think your questions are often the easiest, best way to see so much more about this. Okay, so there's a question that says, so far a lot of this sounds very much like meditation without putting in the time. Can you speak to this? Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, I think that it's not what I'm talking about is just a way of seeing life, right? It's not a practice. It's not a, you're right, it doesn't involve time. There's just no doing to it. There's no practice to it. But what I'll just speak for myself, you know, coming across this understanding about 10 years ago, I used to live almost entirely in everything I thought. Every story my mind went to, every feeling that moved through me, everything out there that was happening, I didn't have a real deep felt sense of there being a whole me beyond all of this psychology and all of that stuff out there. And so there was no meditative feel to my life at all. It's kind of like being on the waves on the surface of an ocean, you know, when there's a lot of waves, you're just being whipped around by life. It's what we mean when we feel like we're being, you know, thrown around, or like we feel like we're a victim to what's happening. We kind of are, when the only place we know to look is at everything that moves through our heads, and we're so identified with it, there's no space. And that's what I think meditation is, right? Is it's kind of space. I mean, I'm sure you could define it in a million ways, but there's a bit of space in there. There's a sense of a me, and then there's a sense of stuff arising within me. And they're not the same thing. They're not at all the same thing. But we can practice meditation, if you like that, as a way of noticing that space. But you're right that this isn't about a practice. I mean, when I've just over the years come to really deeply see, yeah, I'm just not my experience. It's almost like all of life feels a little more like a meditation. You live in a more meditative place without necessarily the practice of it. Let's see. Okay, so one question. I understand I'm okay, but the feeling of being anxious is so hard to handle. How do I be okay with it? I hear you. And I want to suggest that when the feeling of being anxious is so hard to handle that you don't know how to be okay with it, there's a lot to see still. And please, again, don't take this as personal in any way, or, you know, for all of us, there's so much more we can see. But there's a lot to see in that about what a feeling is and who we are. So everyone, all of us at times have this energy move through us, which is all a feeling is. It's energy moving through us with a story attached. So when you feel anxious, there's just a wave of energy. There's always waves of energy moving through you. And then there's a mind saying, oh no, I'm anxious. I don't like this feeling. You know, there's a mind narrating the whole thing. When we're caught up in that, and sometimes we are, no matter what you've seen, no matter who you are, sometimes you're going to get caught up in it. That's okay. But when we're staring at that kind of over and over habitually, it feels like, yeah, I know in theory that I'm okay, but this is really hard to handle. And and what happens for people is we just explore this more and more. This that's so hard to handle is energy. It is the most natural, safest thing in the world. It's made of what you're made of. It's you. It's just coming up in a moment. And we just are innocently afraid of it because we've been conditioned to look at it forever. We've just been looking there over and over again, you know? So there's so much in just kind of seeing more about everything I'm sharing here, like exploring, oh wow, when I feel horrible, that's actually showing me that I'm identified with a feeling. That's not me. That's not the whole of me, not even close. It's a little blip of energy moving through. But as we do that, right? We get so identified with a little blip of energy or this little story in our head that we miss the bigger sense of who we are. So that's why the anxiety hurts. That's why the depression hurts. That's why the worry and the uncertainty and whatever we're going through hurts. It hurts because we're staring at it not on purpose, not, you know, just because that's what we're used to doing, and we're staring at it and it looks like all there is, and the hurt is there to get our attention, to say, whoa, back up and see how good it is back here, you know, you are okay. So it truly is like the more we just see about that, the more we see about that. And I just want you to have a little bit of hope, because honestly, I've been teaching this for years, and I've seen thousands and thousands of people come into this understanding and come to see it more and more deeply. And that's how it goes, as we just start to feel safer. We're still human. You're still going to feel anxious at times. You're still going to get caught up at times, but your grounding in who you are has a lot of room to deepen for all of us. For all of us, it does. And that's great news. It's really good news. Just quickly on that too, another thing that happens often is when we don't feel well, when we're scared or we're tense or we're in our heads, we're worried, we tend to misunderstand that like 180 degrees. So we tend to think, oh, there's a real problem here. I don't feel well. There's a real problem. What's the real problem? And the irony is the feeling of not feeling well is actually there to show us that there's not a real problem. It's there to show us we're identified with something our mind is saying. We're identified with a thought or a fear or a feeling. And it feels like there's a real problem because that's all we're looking at. But hey, step back a little bit, like let that settle down, look away from that a little bit, and you'll remember it's okay. There's no bigger problem here. So it's so cool to see, just so amazing to see that, see how our feelings and how our dis-ease, our feelings of dis-ease are showing us just that we're caught up in our heads, nothing else. And everyone on earth takes them as signs that there's a real true problem and we need to do something right now, to figure it out. Okay, let's see. Okay, so a question is, the pandemic has really sparked my longstanding phobia of death and dying. I sense this understanding can provide some relief for this, but so far I haven't quite grasped it. Do I just accept that one day it's all going to end, I will die, and try to gain understanding that it'll be okay once I do? No, I mean, if that works for you, great, but I'm guessing not so much, or you probably wouldn't be asking the question, right? It's not like, oh, everyone's going to die, let's not worry about it. It's a lot deeper than that, and it's and simpler than that, thankfully. So this phobia of death and dying, or even if others are listening and they wouldn't call it a phobia for them, but it's a fear of death and dying, right? Let's look at what fear really is. You're okay, because you can't not be. You're 100% whole and healthy and expansive and spacious, and everything's okay. And when your mind is super calm, you know that, you feel that way. Everyone does. Everyone feels okay. When our mind is at ease, we're just in the moment, we know we're okay. So that is who we are all the time, no exceptions. And then we have this mind that talks and this experience that moves through us. And and in your case, you have thoughts. Your mind says, "Oh no, you're going to die someday, or maybe sooner rather than later," your mind says. And when we hear our own thinking, when we feel our own feelings, and we're so identified with them that they feel absolutely true. And again, we're losing sight of who we really are just momentarily. We're losing sight of the truth of who we are, and we're super caught up in the thought that says, "You're going to die, you're going to die." Of course, we feel horrible. Again, that horrible feeling is there to show us, hey, you're looking at a tiny, teeny, tiny fraction of the bigger truth of things. You're missing the bigger truth of things, really. And you're hanging out identified with this thought. That's a really scary thought. Anyone would feel horrible believing that. But our discomfort is showing us, it's trying to help us see. We just need a little reminder about how to read our discomfort. It's trying to help us see, hey, look, back up, see the bigger picture, you're just caught up over here. So so when we don't see that, because sometimes we just don't, we pay even more attention to this thought, you're going to die, you're going to die. And then just the way a mind works, because a mind is just a computer, it is a computer that wants to be super efficient, and it wants to prove all of its points. So it wants to confirm all of its theories. So if your mind is over here saying, oh no, I wonder if you're going to die, it will absolutely look out at the world and say, there's a pandemic happening and this many people have died. And here's all the reasons you might be next. And like, that is the most normal, logical thing I can possibly imagine from a brain, given the way a brain works. Now, again, this means nothing about you. This is how everybody's brain works. This means nothing about your future. It means nothing about your health. It's just that you have a well-working brain, And that's what well-working brains would do. They get an idea, you think it's true, so you're really caught up in it, and then it just finds evidence to prove its point all over the place. And the more attention we pay, the more it comes back, and the louder it is, and the more real it is, because we're just like this with it, and we haven't looked back at the bigger picture in a while because we're super afraid of this one thought that we're very identified with. That's what we call a phobia. There's nothing more to it than that. It's a thought that is not the truth, that feels very scary and very true. So we keep looking at it and then finding more and more evidence to make it look true. And then it keeps coming back more and more. So seeing that more clearly, that's how your phobia is going to go away. It's not about, oh, we're all going to die. Like, you might have those realizations along the way, but it's so much, this is what I mean when I say it's so much deeper than that. It's deeper than that because it's about truly seeing what the heck this thought is to begin with. How does this thought work and what's going on here to begin with? And when we see that more clearly, when we see who we are more clearly, and you start to know, oh, anything that gets me so uptight all of a sudden isn't the truth. Imagine that. Like, to just know that we are expansive and calm and peaceful and at home by nature. So anytime we aren't feeling that, and it's a lot of the time, but anytime we aren't feeling that, it's showing us that we're just in our heads looking at a limited version of ourselves. If you start to know, oh, yeah, these feelings are showing me I'm in a limited version of myself, and you start to just naturally see that differently. It's not true. It's just a lie. It's a lie. It's a limited version of myself. You see it differently and everything starts to unravel. And I know sometimes saying it like that can make it sound like it's too good to be true, or that it's like it can't be that simple. And that probably applies to everything I've said here, but it truly is this simple. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings we have as human beings as well, is that we think right past how simple life is. Life is so simple, pandemic or not. Life is so simple. But when our minds are trying to lead us through it, it'll never look simple because a mind doesn't think in simple. A mind thinks in complexity. So seeing what that phobia is, oh my gosh, it changes everything. Is the mind always looking for problems? Is that its function? Kind of. It's one of them. It's one of them. And again, it's only doing that because it loves you and it's trying to protect you. So just evolutionarily, it's, of course, it's predicting who might eat me, when am I going to starve? How am I going to freeze to death? What might happen? And so our mind just has that bent. It still does. Our brains haven't evolved much in a couple 100,000 years. So it still kind of looks for problems that can solve and prevent. But when we see that that's just how our mind works, that that's just what this machine does, and it's doing it for your own good, then you're just not as caught up in it. You can notice that. That's what's so cool, is you start to see, oh, there's my mind trying to predict the future again. That's not possible, but we're less caught up in it. Thank you guys so much for these questions. So many amazing questions. One question is, if you have disease in your family, how's the best way to keep calm and not get involved in losing clarity? So again, just see that disease in your family or not, it's all the same thing. Like, your mind is telling you, oh, but if you have disease in your family, it's a different story. We're kind of having a conversation about that's like a level deeper than that. That your nature, no matter what your family history is, no matter what your personal history is, your nature is health. And I don't mean physical health, but I mean like a bigger expansiveness that can handle anything that comes your way, anything. So when your mind is thinking, oh no, what if this happens? And what if that happens? You're going to feel that. But common sense and our ability to move through life and just take one step and live one moment at a time, that comes from beyond our mind. That doesn't come from the mind. It comes from beyond our thinking, beyond our mind. It's like you see little children just going from one thing to another, like life is living them, and it's doing it for us as well. We don't outgrow that. We just stop listening to it. We just stop noticing it, and we start going up into our head and all of our head strategies. So notice for all of us, like notice how life has lived us. Again, this past 5 months have been the most amazing example of this. So many clear examples if you have the eyes to see them. Now, if we only have the eyes to see all the horrible things that have happened in the world, that's what we'll see. But if, and this is not about positive thinking, but if we truly open ourselves to, wow, have I been resilient? Have I been able to pivot and make changes and just do them? Oh my gosh. I mean, this is, it's amazing. We've never seen this much resilience in our lifetimes. We can say, oh, we've never been through this much change. We've never been through this much uncertainty. That may be true, but we've also never seen this much resilience because we never had to. But when you start to see what's there beyond our mind's thinking, it's incredible. Sorry, some of these questions are long, so I just want to see if I can kind of get to the meat of some of them. So I want to say a little bit about habits, because some people have mentioned different habits that have kind of come back during this time. So just again, when we're living in our heads, and I don't mean that as a off or on, we're either in our heads or we're not, we're all living in our heads often. But the more we're believing our thinking identified with all of this, and we're just temporarily losing sight of the bigger picture of who we really are and how things are really working, the more that's going on, the worse we're going to feel, because we're just beat around by whatever's happening. There's no real sense of groundedness or security in that, because we know our heads are always changing, always telling us a different story. Life is always changing, always telling us a different story. So if that's where we're looking, either our heads or out in the world, for any sense of security and peace, we are never going to find it there, not in any sustainable long-term way, right? So when that's the case and we don't feel well for a long time, we're so resilient, we're so healthy that the bigger us starts looking for something, some way to kind of feel better. And so again, we have all these horrible emotions. It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but we feel all this discomfort and fear and anxiety and all of that, which is just there to get our attention, to show us, hey, you're looking like this at life, and there's a whole this to look at. So when all that stuff comes up, if we don't know what it's showing us, and we take it as evidence that, see, things are really bad and now I'm anxious and now this is happening, we're not designed to sit in a feeling like that, that far from home for long. So we will do anything we can see to do to feel better. And often that means we grab things. We want to quiet our mind, right? We drink more, we eat more, our old habits come back. Anything we can do to cope and kind of turn down the volume in our heads, we do. And I really want you to see, though, that that's not another problem. It's another wake-up call. It's another way that we're so resilient, that the bigger us is saying, this is not you. Don't sit in this feeling and stare at this little corner of life forever and think this is all there is. You need to get back to you. And sometimes the best we can see to do is some of those old coping mechanisms. So one question around binge eating. When I binge, I don't find the time to step back to see the hole. All I see is a black hole that needs to be filled. I understand that I'm okay. I find it interesting that the binging is taking place now when I'm leading a weight loss group. How do I explain this? It's just a lot of thinking. And I just want you to see, don't try to make sense of it. I can hear you like, well, why now? And this shouldn't be happening here. And I already know this. So what's that about? Your mind's not going to make sense of it for you there. Just step back from all of it and see that when you have this sudden overwhelming urge to do anything, because all habits are the same, when we have this overwhelming urge to do anything like that, we're wanting to escape from what we're feeling. We're so caught up in our heads that all the alarm bells are going off and we just want to feel like ourselves again. But rather than eating a bunch of food, see what's happening. That alarm system is going off to show you, hey, you're not seeing the big picture. You may know that you're healthy, that's wonderful. But in that very moment, you aren't seeing it, and that's okay. We don't see it all the time. But the feeling of wanting to reach for things like that is showing us, it's getting our attention to show us where we're looking and how narrow our life has become in that moment. I don't mean this in a big picture way. In that moment, we're staring at a thought or a feeling or a circumstance saying this is true and it isn't. So it's showing us to step back. It's a question about what is the difference between depression and anxiety, and are the causes the same? I don't know, but what I would want, well, I mean, I could give you an answer, but I don't think it matters. What I would want you to see in that is that, again, like take a step back. When we're up here with, is it depression? Is it anxiety? What's the cause? We're so in concepts and ideas, and it's not helpful there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we call it. I mean, we could call it anything you want. You can make up a name for either one of those. It doesn't matter. What you're feeling is energy that you're afraid of, that our mind is saying, oh no, this feels bad and this is horrible and this shouldn't be happening. And when we feel that long enough, we feel the stuff that we call depression, anxiety, whatever. But see it all of it as this opportunity to show you, wow, I'm really caught up in my experience. Again, meaning your thoughts or your feelings. I'm really caught up in what's moving through me. And I really could like let that settle down because it does totally by itself. That's where what our resilience is that our design, like we said earlier, our design is that this stuff that moves through us, it moves out. It truly does. It goes out on its own. It just wants to cycle through. So the more we're kind of back here in who we truly are, and we're like, okay, this is just energy moving through me. We're not like this caught up trying to figure it out. The more space there is, and the more it truly does move through us. Oh my gosh, there's so many questions, you guys, that I want to answer. It's amazing. They're so good. Um, I might go over a little bit and answer some questions, but before we get to the end of the hour, I just wanted to mention that um, the Little School of Big Change is beginning in the end of September. And if you want to see more about this, if you want to be in an amazing community, especially now, I mean, it's the most supportive, loving community I've ever seen. It's so good. The students, I lead the Little School of Big Change twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. So during the spring course was right when the pandemic was hitting. And so many of the students that were in that course just couldn't say enough about how helpful it was to be, especially now, in community with people in a course that's fully online, that's looking toward resilience and change and habits and anxiety. I mean, it's like it couldn't be more perfectly designed for what we're going through right now. So I won't say a lot about it right here, but it starts in September, and you can check out the littleschoolofbigchange.com. I'll put it in the chat to see more about it, and know that this Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern time, so the same time that this webinar started, I'm doing a free Q&A on my Facebook page, just a Facebook Live casual thing. But if you're curious about the school, if you have any questions about it at all, come to that Q&A and we can just chat and I'll answer any of your questions. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to take a couple more questions, but I just want to be respectful of the top of the hour if people have to drop off. But I will stay on and take some more questions because I appreciate them so much. I really hope that something in this has helpful. I mean, even if it's just a little but huge thing of helping us see, wow, there's something other than what my head is telling me all the time, because truly that's all we need. It's a little backing up, and then you start to see so much more. You start to see, wow, I don't have to believe everything that moves through my head. I don't have to fear all of my thoughts and feelings. I don't have to hang on circumstances waiting for them to change. I can feel okay right now I mean, I can't imagine anything better. And that's what's happening right now is we're getting the opportunity to fall into that and to be grounded in that more than ever. So I'm, as much as I hate this pandemic as much as everyone else, I'm also very grateful for it, honestly, for what it's given us, for what it's pointing us toward. It's amazing. So okay, so let me go to a couple more questions. I'll just maybe take like another one or two. There's a question about doing nothing. And the person says, because I think sometimes I'm thinking, I mean, I need to do something, right? Because sometimes my mind uses this against me to be in a situation longer than needed. Yes, if your mind is saying, see, you see that. If your mind is saying, oh, don't do anything, you're not supposed to do anything, there's nothing you have to do, and you feel like you said here that your mind is using that against you, well, you see it. That's just your mind. Like it's using it against you. So yeah, I mean, of course, we do things in life. We do a lot of things. We're designed to do things. We're designed to act and be in the world and all of that. It's no one's saying at all like sit back and do absolutely nothing. What we are saying, what I'm saying is that our experience moves through us and that we don't have to do anything to make that happen. We don't. It is the truth of it. It's just like we don't have to do anything to make our planet spin tonight. It's going to spin all the way around. Like it's going to do whatever it needs to do. We don't have to manage that. And while the planet is spinning and while our feelings and our experience are moving through us, we'll want to do things. Things will occur to us to do, even to help ourselves. We'll say, oh, I'm just feeling not so great. I know my experience is moving through me, but I'm going to call my friend. Or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go work out or whatever. Like, great. That's part of our design too. So it's definitely not do nothing. It's just seeing more about how much is done through us and for us. Okay, so even though on one level I know my thoughts are creating my negative experience, in the moment it seems so convincingly real and threatening that it feels unbearable. And in the midst of that desperation, I feel so compelled to act to reduce the discomfort. How do I cope with what feels like a desperate emergency? Such a big question that kind of encompasses everything we're talking about here. You start to see that this desperate emergency isn't. And I don't expect you to hear me say those words and then suddenly see it, right? It doesn't work like that often. It might for some people at sometimes, but that's not, it's not a magic wand. But really, really consider the truth of that. We start to see that, yes, we all have moments where we feel like all of a sudden there's a desperate emergency. It is part of being human. I could tell you why that happens in a brain-based answer. I can tell you how our mind works that way. We can look at it at a spiritual answer. Like we could look at that from every angle. And it is 100% part of being human that all of a sudden at times we get so caught up in our thinking, it feels like a desperate emergency. But what helps is seeing this clearly, really truly seeing what's actually going on. What's actually going on is you're okay. You're better than okay. Everything is well. And psychology has moved through you. Your own mind had said, oh no, there's a problem. And you're like this with that. And it feels like a desperate emergency. And we're so identified with our experience or with something out there, thinking we need that to change so we can feel who we really are, so we can be okay, that the pressure mounts to get our attention, to show us, oh, you're okay. Like, just, you're looking like this. That's the problem. You're seeing a teeny tiny fraction of the whole of life. And that's going to hurt. It's meant to. It's meant to. So know that if there is actually an emergency for any of us, we know what to do. We will know what to do. We have fight or flight. We have all kinds of stuff in our design that equips us to act in emergencies. That's not what we're talking about here. When there's a real emergency, by and large, people absolutely know what to do. And you know what they say? They say, well, I didn't even think about it. There was nothing to think about. I just jumped in and pulled them out of the lake, or I just ran out of the burning house. We don't think our way through these things. We are lived, so we know what to do. So when we're sitting here in our chair thinking, oh no, but your body's not moving, that's showing you, it's just showing you that there's no real emergency. Your mind is saying that there is. And the more we see that, the more it just changes. Truly, you start to just wake up to what's really going on, and it begins to reverse. So there's a question about, where do our feelings come from if not from the mind? Does the peace in nature not come from the mind? Um, I don't see that it does. I see that the peace and who we are is there far beyond the mind, because our mind can be doing whatever. Our mind goes all kinds of places, and it tells all kinds of stories, and and we're here, we're okay in all of that. That's our resilience, right? We can take those hits and we can feel it, and then when our mind settles down, we realize, wow, I'm still here and I'm still okay. So I don't see that helpful, wise stuff like that comes from our mind. I think it comes through our mind. That's how we hear it. That's how we know. We do have thoughts that are really helpful at times and feel really true and are really wonderful to have. But see if you can just see it in a slightly bigger way. Because if you think it's coming from your mind, your only option there, just naturally, is to pay a ton of attention to your mind. And I think we all know that's not going to go well. So see that it's not that it's coming from the mind. And again, this is just my take on it. It's more that it's coming through the mind. It's who we are. It's the same energy that's spinning the planets is giving you the idea you need and the common sense that you're looking for. And it comes through your head, but not from your head. I think that helps a lot in helping us to not pay attention to our head quite as much. The question, do we have to feel anxious ever? We don't have to. Anxious, see, like, we'll feel fear, and fear is super adaptive when it's needed. Like when there's something in your path, when there's a true threat, it's great that we feel fear, right? But anxious is different. Anxiety is us sitting in our heads, fearing our own thoughts. There's not a real threat. There's not a real threat. Our minds will convince us that there is. You're having a heart attack, you're going to die of COVID. Like, your mind will convince you of that, but there's not a real threat in that moment. And because you're not doing anything. There's no bear to run away from. There's no burning house to run out of. So when we're sitting there in our mind spinning in worry and what if and oh no, that's anxiety. And there's no, as far as I can see, there's no benefit to that. It's okay. No, it's not, it's kind of like don't be afraid of it. It's not a bad thing. Everybody feels it at times, but it's not helpful, really. Okay, this might be my last question. So someone says, just had a baby and has been really on lockdown due to all of that as well. And now I'm really struggling with the idea of eventually taking my new baby out and people meeting her. I'm just so scared she'll catch it. I think I love that you asked that question, because it's one of these very practical kind of concerns that so many people have, like, what is right and what is wrong? And my mind goes there too. Like, am I crazy to go to the grocery store, or am I crazy to not go to the grocery store? Like, and that's the weird thing about what we're living through right now, is we don't know. Like, you can find a million experts and politicians and everyone else that will tell you you're right on both sides of that, and it's very extreme and very divisive, as we all know. So we don't know, but look beyond that. When you're sitting at home now with your baby thinking, oh no, I'm so afraid to take her out, just notice that. That's your mind off, worried about something that's not even happening. When it comes time, when it feels like, maybe let's go out and let's introduce you to this family member or that person or whatever, your mind might be all over the place, telling stories, trying to predict things, but just notice that something else is living you. You are lived to do what makes absolute sense to you, and what feels best for you and your baby in every moment. And your head coming in trying to manage the whole thing for you, nothing but a mess. So just see if you can get a little bit of a sense of the difference. Again, you'll see it because your head is the one trying to tell you right now what you should do next week. Well, you don't need to know next week until next week. You just need to be here now. And it's like we get the common sense and the resourcefulness and the ideas that we need when we need them. We don't get them weeks ahead of time. We get them when we need them in real time. And the more we see that and come to trust that, the easier and better it is. We just start to live from that guidance. All right. Thank you guys so much. If any of you have a super burning question that you truly feel wasn't touched upon here, like if you put it up and we just didn't have time, you can send it to me. Okay. But yeah, I hope that you can maybe kind of take this in and maybe listen back. And I hope that it's been helpful in some way. And please, if you do have any questions, anything at all, reach out, because I know this is such a time for growth and such an opportunity to be grounded in what's true. And I've seen it for so many people and I want to see it for everyone. So let me know how I can support you. And thank you again so much for being here. Bye, everyone.